Hello students, I'm coming to you from my basement lab with my Philadelphia University t-shirt. Hope you're doing well and settling into a groove and not into a rut. This week we'll talk about interaction, but before that we'll talk about validation of your code. So we'll discuss HTML forms. We'll not actually write one, no thanks to COVID-19, but if you'd like to try to do one, you can let me know and I can help you through it. In most cases, you'll just copy and paste them from a pre-written form anyway, but I'll show you what a form looks like and the components. And then we'll take a exploration into CSS transitions and transforms, and we'll do a transition. And then we'll take a brief glimpse into JavaScript, including making a LOL cat's clock. All right, on with the show. Okay, let's talk about validation. We're not talking about the kind that says that you are enough, although that is important. This is validation for HTML. To validate our code, we go to validator.w3.org. And you can see here, this is what the first part of the page looks like. You can enter your website here and check, or you could upload a file, or just copy and paste your code here, and we'll show you this in a minute. HTML validation will help you find errors so you can fix them quickly. Valid code is important for technical quality, and so your sites function properly, and for other reasons we'll get into in a minute. We also have validation for CSS. That validator is at jigsaw.w3.org/css-validator, and I'll show you that in a minute too. And we validate our CSS also for similar reasons, mostly for technical quality. But here's the thing. Browsers are very forgiving, at least they are now. They weren't so much many years ago, but current browsers are very forgiving. If your code isn't completely valid, the browser will probably show your code okay enough. Now, that sounds like a hedge, and it's a little bit of a hedge, but still. So here's some HTML code with some missing tags. Some browsers will fix this and show it anyway, but you want to make sure that you don't miss things like this. Even with that kind of code, your browser will still show your page okay probably. So why do we do any of this then? 1, quality control, so you can be the best coder you can be, and validation will help you find mistakes. Validated code is better SEO. Of course, that's search engine optimization. If your code is more valid and well constructed, then browsers, search engines will index them more quickly. Validated code is better UX, because fewer website errors mean better experiences for users, as you can imagine. Cross-browser problems are reduced with code validation, so between Safari and, say, Chrome and Firefox and Opera and whatnot, each browser will handle code differently, so validated code means you have one solid base to send to all the different browsers, and you will reduce mistakes that way. Validated code is important for multiple device accessibility. So beyond just between browsers, between tablets and phones and desktops, if your code's validated, then it's more likely to show up nicer in different devices. Sometimes browsers won't save you, so save yourself and your code from falling through the cracks by validating your code. Also, validated code is easier to maintain. If you reduce mistakes, then any new errors or things you might find will be easier to find. So let's do some. Let's go to our code validator, validator.w3.org. And so I'll upload a file using the validate by file upload. So I'll choose a file. I'll use last week's code. I haven't done anything to it since last week. So let's try this. My index.html file, click open, and then click check. So I have some warnings in yellow and errors in red. Okay. So right now, all of these errors are with the iframe from YouTube. Last week, if you remember, we had used iframes to bring in SoundCloud and YouTube content. Sometimes they don't play well with validation, but they still work and they're still fine. So things like this are generally not a problem. Here's one that's an actual problem. So line 161, there's an extra end tag for this div here. So let's go back to Atom and fix that. So let's start Atom. So they said to go to 161 and take out this extra div tag. Okay. So if I save this, I can go back to my validator. So I'll go back to the beginning of validator, upload my file again, and then click check. And now that error about the extra div tag is gone. So that's good. These same errors from the iframes are still there. These are okay. Let's see here. We have a warning. So it says, consider adding a language attribute to HTML start tag to declare the language of the document. Okay, so what they mean to say is we should go to our code, and this is over here. Back in the very beginning, we should add a language attribute to our HTML. So let's just check to see where they said to do it. From line 1, column 16 to line 2, so in the HTML tag. So that goes here. You can see my cat. He is trying to help. So if we save this, go back and start over on validator, file upload, do it again. Good, so that warning is gone. Now you don't have to clear out your warnings. What you really want to do is clear out your errors. So just so you can see what a green across your screen looks like, I'll take out these iframes on line 33 and 34 so that you can see what a fully validated code looks like. Now again, these iframes, this is the code that comes from the website themselves, the SoundCloud and YouTube themselves, so I wouldn't worry about if they're valid or not through the validator, but for all other code, you definitely want to get rid of any warnings or errors. So let's go back here. We can take out this iframe here. I'll just delete it and save and go back to here, start over, validate my file upload, do my index again, open, and then check. Oh, what did I do here? Oh, this next iframe, forgot to do that one. Switch back, let's delete this. Press YouTube, save, go back to browser. Now I like to start in the fresh, in the address bar, to file upload, index again, check. Ah, this is what you want. Document checking completed, no errors or warnings to show. So let's try the CSS validator now. We'll go to File Upload. We'll choose our CSS file. Here's the one we're just using. Click check, and we've got an error here. So it says parse error on line 172. So let's go look at 172 in Atom. So if I go down to 172, so here's a stray end of a comment part here. So that's what the problem was. So if I just delete this and save my file again, and then come back to the validator, start over. Oops. File upload again, choose the same file. We should be green across the screen. Oh, what did I do? One more mistake. Okay, so let's check 172 again. What did I do? An extra character over here. Delete that. Save. And then go back, do this all over again. File upload, choose file. Same one we used before. Check. And we're green across our screen now. So no error found. We're good to go. Our CSS is completely valid. What do you think, Kitty? Kitty don't care. Okay, let's talk interaction on the web. First, let's talk about the HTML version of it. So that's primarily forms. All of you have filled out HTML forms in your life, so you have seen them before. And let's just break down what they are consisted of. So the main parts of an HTML form, of course, you need a form tag that's over here. The second part of an HTML form is a method. And so you have two choices here. One is post, the other one is get. So the method of post is best for when users are adding to or deleting things from a database, or when you upload a file, or you enter sensitive data like a password. That method is a post. So submitting your homework on Canvas, that would be a method post. Method get is simpler. This is only for when you are retrieving data from a web server, like doing a Google search. You're just pulling information down. You're not adding anything to the database. That you just need method get. The third part of an HTML form, besides the form tag itself for the method, is the action. The action contains the URL for the page on the server that receives the submitted information. So URL for the page on the server that receives the submitted information. It's usually in PHP. We're not getting into what PHP is all about. That's more for the advanced class, but somewhere your information will get put into this page and done with on the back end. IDs are important because they identify the form distinctly from other elements so that JavaScript can target it specifically. We wouldn't use class here so much. You can use classes for things, but in order to identify the form, you definitely need an ID. The input over here, these are the spaces where we interact with a form, like this one for type text. So this is the code for a label and then a little field to type your first name. So it looks like this. Here's the label, and then here's the little box, text box that you can type things into. Other types of input include radio buttons. So radio buttons, you can only click one of these. Let's pick one. That's a radio button. This is how it's constructed. So there's a label here for title, and then there's a second label for Mr., and then another label for Mrs., and another label for Miss. And then within the label tag is the input. So type radio gives you that little circle. And here's two things you'll need for each. So each thing you can input needs a name and a value. And you'll see that the Mr. that has a name title, Mrs. also has a name title, and Miss also has the name title because they're all part of the title, but each value is different. So that one is the Mr., this one is the Mrs., and this one is the Miss. So even though they'll have the same title category really, each of them has a different value. To type in a password, you need type password. So here's a label, and here's the input tag, type password, name password. So it knows in the back end, what type of information this is. This is what it looks like. And browsers will know, since this is a type password, the browser will know to automatically hide the password when you type in this box. Okay. To get drop-down type menus, you can use the select tag. And the select tag looks like this. You have a whole bunch of options here for different things you can select. And then you have a closing select tag. So all of this turns into this. And you'll see this double arrow or some other kind of symbol that indicates a drop-down. So if you click this over here, then you'll get a drop-down menu that shows up down here. So this is what it looks like when you click on the drop-down. And you can select one of these options here. Checkbox, you've seen a checkbox. Here's the code that goes for something for when you click the little box that says that you agree to the terms and conditions. So you got a label here, and then within the label tag, you have the actual input from a checkbox, and then some text, and then a link, and then such here, and then that gives you this. So you got the little checkbox part, some text, another link. So that was here, this link was here, this link is closed here, and then this is your final result. So there's two ways to do buttons. One type is here, this is the actual button tag. And then we have here a special type of button called the reset. So when you click the reset button, it'll reset the form. So you'll see this in these kinds of situations. You may enter some information up here, and then you can either click sign up or reset form, which empties all the fields and you can start over. The other type of button is something called the input type submit. So when you use type submit, then you'll get this kind of button. So when you click on this button, it'll submit the form, whatever you put into this name section. So there's two ways to do a button. One is the actual button tag, and the other way is the type submit button. This is the required attribute, so you put it in the input section if you want it to be required. Usually things like name and address, special information you may need, a little asterisk or it's marked red or something. That uses the required attribute. So if this was required and you didn't do it, you'll get a little warning that you have to actually enter this because it's required. The text area tag, like so, gives the user a box to type text in. It looks like this. Here's the text area. I notice that the user can resize this text area box by clicking on this and dragging that little symbol there. There are so many more options. We won't even get into them, but know that you've got all sorts of different things to add to your HTML forms. So that was interaction with HTML. This is interaction with CSS. And I know you might be thinking, all semester I've been saying CSS is for styling and maybe positioning and things. So there's one more thing to add to that, and it's interaction. The main way we'll talk about CSS interactivity is through transitions. So a transition, just to set some definition, A transition is the change from status A to status B for a limited number of properties. So not everything in CSS can be transitioned, but there are a few useful things. Things like duration, timing function, and delay on all properties or just some can be transitioned. So let's get into that a little bit. So for duration, you can make a transition happen over X amount of time. So I'll show you a code pen that explains this. So what I'll show you in the code pen is this blue box. If I hover or roll over it, it'll turn red. And since there's no transition applied to it, it'll turn red right away. And then in the box on the right, this one has a transition. And if I hover or roll over it, over a 2-second period of time, it'll turn from blue to red. So let's go to CodePen. Okay, so here is CodePen. This is a great website for you to test code in. I'll give you all these links. These links are already in Canvas, so play around this for yourself. But if I mouse over the left box, again, it'll turn red right away, like that. So if I do the right box, then over 2 seconds, and I have to stay over it for 2 seconds, it'll transition from blue to red. So move over, 2 seconds, turns red. So that is a CSS transition, and this is how it works. So you want to change this background color from blue to red. This is how it works here. So background color is set for blue. And then when we hover over it, that is a pseudo class. And so we need to have the class of demo, like here, class demo. So anything with hover, background color turns red. So just like here, both of these have the class demo. Or no, this one has demo. This one here is demo 2. So when you hover over demo, background color turns red. So hover over demo 2, then the background color turns red. We also have demo 2 transition 2 seconds. So this is the CSS selector that you need. Transition 2 seconds. There's other stuff you can add here, but this I left it out. So what do we see here? For demo 2, which is this one here, background color red, but also transition 2 seconds. And that's how you get this easy transition. Now, let's go back to our presentation. Timing function. This is a way to finally control how your transition happens. So you can ease it in, you can ease it out. There's all sorts of combinations, and I can give you a list of different ways to write it. But let's go back to CodePen and I'll show you. So here's the one I showed you before. Again, this one, no transition. This one, the text will change from white to black with no transition, but the background color will change over a 5-second period. And I have written in here for it to ease out. So it'll go slower near the end of the 5 seconds. And also, I have written here transition delay. So after 2 seconds, it'll start to do its 5-second transition from blue to red. And near the end of the 5 seconds, it'll go slower with easing out. So here we go. 1, 2, now it changes from blue to red. And it did slower at the end. Again, so once you mouse back off, it turns back to blue. And then I'll mouse over, in 2 seconds it'll start, and it'll go from blue to red, and near the end of the transition period, it'll go a little slower. So that's the nice way to get a lot of control in your transition. So I already showed you delay. In order to have a delay, you have to have a duration. So this one had 5-second duration and a 2-second delay on top of that. So you can write them all shorthand, smush them all together here, or write them out individually. I'll show you in a code pen. So you can write out transition duration, transition timing function, transition delay, but you can also just do a shorthand. So those are transitions. This is transforms. So using CSS transforms, you can move things called with translate. So you can move an element on the horizontal axis by doing transform and then translate and some number. So that code here, transform, translate x 40 pixels, moves things 40 pixels to the right, or the positive x direction. So that's what the end result is. This moved over 40 pixels this way. Translate y moves things on the vertical axis, if you remember your math. So this code here, transform, translate y 20 pixels, moves things 20 pixels down because positive values go down in translation. Negative values go up, so that's tricky. Just watch out for that. And you can do things like scale and skew and matrix and rotate and perspective and transforms. So let's look at some more code pens with that. Again, here's our two blue boxes. Demo 2 has a transform rotate 45 degrees. So here you go. Here's a 45-degree rotation. In this example, here's a scale. So demo 2 is scaled half and half in x and y directions, so it's the same as scale x and scale y. I just wrote it as scale to do a shorthand. So I can do this, you can see it better. So transform scale 0.5, 0.5, so 50% on both sides, same as transform scale x 0.5 and transform scale y at 0.5. So that's scale. You can skew things. So you can skew in the x and y directions. So demo 2 is skewed x in the 25 degrees in the x direction and the y direction. And then demo 3 is only skewed in the x direction only. So if you only put skew, then it only works on the x direction. And in this case, I did it minus 25 degrees. Again, here's translation. This one was translated 50 pixels in the x and y directions. So again, 50 means going down, not going up, and then it's over 50 pixels. Finally, we can do transforming in 3D. So this is rotated 1, 1, and 1 at 90 degrees. This is what that looks like. I've never done this before other than this. If you really get into it, you can do all sorts of rotations in X, Y, and Z directions, and even rotating with more 90 degrees. Now we can talk about CSS animation. You can animate properties like color and position. So what's the difference between this and transition? In animation, it's automatic. So once it shows up, once your page loads, your animation will show up. But a transition requires a user action. So that's the interactive part about it. Animation is not necessarily interactive, but since we're talking about CSS transitions, we might as well talk about CSS animation. One concept to know going into CSS animations is the concept of keyframes. So it's a concept from old school animation. So if you see these drawings of Captain Hook from Peter Pan, animator, the lead animator, will draw these keyframes. These are the main actions. Okay, and then an assistant. Back in the day, it was an apprentice. Now they can computers to do this, but all the actions in between this part and this part has to get drawn out by somebody else because the lead animator does the main ones. And so CSS animation works in the same principle. So let's look at an example in CodePen. Whoa, so it bounces back and forth and changes color. So pretty cool. So let's break down what we see here. So first we need to build what actually happens in our animation. And so here's the code we need for the movement of this blue box back and forth from the starting point here to some point over here and back again. So what we do is we start an @ rule with keyframes, and then we have to give our keyframe a name. So here's movement, and then we have to tell it at certain points what to do. So at the 0% time, I want it to be in a starting position, so it's translated nowhere. And then at the end of it, at the 100% mark, I want it to be back in its spot where it started. So at 100% and 0%, it's in 0, 0, which is the point right here where it started. And halfway through my animation, I wanted to translate 500 pixels X direction. So at 0, it starts here. At 50% of the time, it's here at the this point here. And then from 50 to 100, it goes back to the starting point. So 0 here, 50% here, and then back to 100% there. So that's the movement of the keyframe. So this is the animation that I want. I want it to go from here to here and back again. And so we need this, and then in our CSS back up here, then under demo, we have animation. So in the demo class, we'll have animation to actually activate the animation. We need the name movement that we had here. 5 seconds is the duration of the animation. This is something called animation direction. Because of the way I wrote it, we don't actually need this here, but I'll explain what that is in a second. And then infinite means that this loops back and forth, and then ease in. So it starts slower in the beginning and then moves into a little faster pace. And then 2 seconds is the delay. So let's go through the individual things here. So this is the long way to write this here. So it starts with the name, the duration, the direction. Now there's you can do this forwards, reverse, alternate, reverse. Then iteration count is just how many times you want it to run. So you can put a number here or infinite. And then timing function is the same as the transition timing function. You can have ease in, you can have ease out. You don't have to have a timing function, but this is where you would put it. And then the delay goes at the end because you have to have a duration. So ours starts after 2 seconds. So that's just for the movement. I also have a color change going on here. I'll write the at rule here for keyframes, the name of color change here, and then at 0 and 100 it is blue, but over here at the halfway point it's green. So let me animate that here. Again, it's under here. The first one we had movement and then a comma, and then the second one color change, keyframes color change here, goes here. Again, 5 seconds. This alternates. This loops forever. It eases into it, and it starts within 2 seconds. Again, if you're going to do a shorthand, then your name, duration, direction, iteration count, timing function, and delay all have to be in the same order. So this is the correct order. So let's add a transition to our site. We can do this by making a transition for our menu links. So once you open up your download for this week, that is HTML CSS Part 6. That has the same code we worked on last week. It's the same example website we've been working on all semester. Same index. It's this site here. Right now, when you hover over, it changes the background color of the box here and the text color. So let's add a transition to that to make a more smoother transition. So if you go to Atom, now we want to open up our CSS file that we're working with here. So that's over here. And we want to act on the A. So that's down here. So there are 2 ways to do CSS transitions. There's writing out the long way, and then there's the shortcut. I'll show you the long way first. So what we want to do in our site is just make the color change smoother for both the background color and the text color. So what we can do here is do transition. Duration. You can either put in seconds or milliseconds. So over half a second, let's do 500 milliseconds for the duration. And we can do transition timing function. Here it gives you the options that you can put in. By default, these things change linearly, easy for me to say. You can ease in and out. You can just ease out. There are steps. You can take steps here. You can set out some different steps. You can do a cubic Bezier, so you can get really fancy with your timing functions. Let's see if I can find the timing function guide. Here it is. Here's a cheat sheet. So you can have all sorts of different ways it eases in. Now I have this link in Canvas. So you can put certain numbers here in a cubic Bezier to really get a fine transition going. So that's easings.net. Some of these can be done with keyframes. So here's just a way to do that. Let's go back to Atom. So the timing function, we'll just use ease in, be easy about it. And let's see if this is enough to work both the color and the background color. So if we refresh this, let's see if this works. So it works. Works for this one too. Works for this one too. So that's a good result. So all we have to do is add transition duration and transition timing function here. So let's see if we can change this to the shorthand version. Let's delete these. Let's start over. Let's see if transition 500 milliseconds and ease in is enough to work on both the color and background color. So let's refresh our page again, and let's see. It works. So that's all you need to do if you want to change the duration and the timing function. If you want to add a delay, it can go here. So if we want to do a 2-second delay, you can add that here. Check our code here. So there it goes. After 2 seconds, it changes color from background of green to black and white to orange for the text. And then 2 seconds after I move it, then it changes back. So please submit the code that has this in here that you added, or the longhand version of it. And that's how you do a transition in CSS. Now let's talk JavaScript. So my expectation for you in this class, and this was even before all of this coronavirus stuff, is for you to copy and paste. So if you can copy and paste, you can use JavaScript. Some common uses of JavaScript. One is Google Analytics. It's a free and easy way to track usage on your site. So this is something to definitely include on your sites going forward, is have a little bit of analytics going for you. Galleria.io is another slideshow built in JavaScript that is relatively easy to use. They give you a bunch of instructions on how to use Galleria. So if you're interested in doing that for your websites, that's the way to go. So you go to galleria.io on the web. Looks like this. And so you can build things like this for your website. And in the documentation, they have a really good beginner's guide for you to get started with it. So that's good to know. And jQuery is a library of pre-written JavaScript for creating user interface elements and a lot more. So some things to remember about JavaScript. Just like real estate, location, location, location. What does that mean? It means that where you place the JavaScript code matters. So you have to think through carefully where your code will go. So how do we think about this? So stuff like Google Analytics usually goes near the bottom of the HTML, so somewhere before the closing body tag. jQuery stuff, usually at the top of the HTML in the head. So in the head section, some of the jQuery stuff will go. So what's the difference? Why one or the other? If it deals with the structure of the site, and oftentimes jQuery does that, it probably needs to go close to the top. So probably in the head, if not very soon after in the top of the body. So in the head is usually where this kind of stuff would go. But Google Analytics needs the entire page to load so it can analyze it, and so it goes bottom of the HTML. So things like your GA tracking code, stuff like that, or your tracking script, that'll go close to the bottom near the closing body tag. So what is jQuery? jQuery is a kind of JS library. So there are different kinds of libraries for different kinds of information, right? So in the same thing in JavaScript. So for interaction, they use the jQuery UI library. Another example of a JavaScript library is reveal.js, and I used reveal.js to make my website many years ago. So just to show you what reveal.js can do for you, here's my stuff. Here's some stuff here and some other stuff, and it does this, so it's cool. This is all built in reveal.js. So in practice, you'll need to link to a jQuery.js file and a link to the specific library file. So how this works is there's a overall jQuery.js file, and then the specific library, like jQuery UI.js, you need a link to both of these when you actually put it into your HTML. So let's do some. Okay, so here's a LOL cat clock. So this is fun. So right now I'm recording this at 9:37 p.m. and the picture that we see is cat. Good evening, cat. And so using LOL cat clock, you can set different times, and based on the times that you have, you'll see a different picture of cats. And you can also press this button, start party time and end party time. So if we just click this button, it's party time. And if we click the button again, and the party's over, and it goes back to the picture that we had. So since it's 9:37, we can set a wake up time for the hour, and it's split up by hours, that it gives us as a option here. So if we switch this to 9 to 10 p.m., then it'll change the picture in this space here, and that's how you get the interactive part. So let's change this. So now it's time to get up. So we can use the other options here. So let's switch this back off of not wake up time. So now it's back to good evening. And if we split lunchtime to whatever time it is now, which is 9:38, then once we select this, then it's nom 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 time. And we can do the same thing for nap time. So let's switch this back off so it's not interfering with it. We can set a nap time for now, and now is nap time. So that's an LOL clock, LOL cat clock, and let's build one. Okay, so once you have your folder, you'll have an index file here, a CSS folder and file here, and a JavaScript folder and file here. So in Atom, we want to open up our index file so you can add the script tag. I've given you the index file and the CSS file and the JavaScript file. You don't have to write on any of this. But if we were under normal circumstances, I may go through what all of this means. But for now, the 30,000-foot view of JavaScript is a lot of it is set up to check if something's happening, then something else will happen. Or if certain conditions are met, then certain things will happen. And so that's how JavaScript works. And this is how we get interaction on the web, is a bunch of scenarios are set up. if this, then that, or if it's a certain time, then certain gets shown. And that's what happens with LOLCat. So going back to the HTML, we want to put our script tag somewhere in this code so that it works. Because right now, if we were to look at this in the browser, it wouldn't work properly. So let's just do that real quick. Open up our file. Right now, it's not working properly, but it tells us this is where the time events are reported. If we do anything to this, nothing happens. Clock doesn't show here. The clock goes here. It's not being shown because the script is not connected properly. So we need to fix this. So I've given you all of the files except for where to put the script tag. And so since the JavaScript needs to work on a finished constructed page, it should go at the bottom of the page. And usually it goes right before the closing body tag. So right here, you'll add script type, and it'll complete it for you. In our case, we want text/JavaScript, needs that. And then we need to actually link to this script.js file over here. And so we use src to do that. And since it's in the JS folder, we need to write JS and then script.js, so like so. And then don't forget we need a closing tag here. So all this looks good. We should save our file here and go back to our browser. And if we refresh this, now this should work properly. So it does. And at the time of recording, it's 9:57. And so since it's 9:57, it's time for a good evening cat. And so if I set a wake up time for right now, this same hour, we should have a different picture show up. So it's wake up time. And again, we can set lunchtime for the same time. Let's just turn this back off. And then set the lunchtime for now. Then we should have a new picture show up. So that's here. Let's have some lunch. And then we turn this off some other time. Go back to our good evening cat. Set nap time for now. Then we have sleep type kitty. And again, if we click this button, that's party time and party over. So we have a working LOLCat clock. And so what you'll need to do, again, is to go back to Adam, make sure you add this in the right spot, and then just submit that. And that's LOLCat's clock.